At exactly midnight, the doorbell cut through the neighborhood's buzz. I opened it, and my daughter fell into my arms. Her cheek was bruised, her breath ragged. "Mom," she rasped, "he dragged me over the stairs." 10 times. If you clicked for this story, you clicked for the truth. You'll get it. Every last piece. But first, a question I can't shake. How do you protect the person you love most when the law, the neighbors, and the whispers all seem louder than her screams? Stay with me. By the end, you'll know what I chose and why there's no going back. I'd just finished a double shift. The television was a silent blue rectangle in the dark, the fan hiccuping every few seconds like it forgot how to breathe. Our street never sleeps. Motorbikes threading the block, dogs arguing with shadows, a radio across the way stuck on late-night ballads. I was halfway between the couch and a dream when the first knock landed, then another, then a frantic cluster that made my bones wake up before my eyes did. "Who is it?" My training asked the question. My heart already knew. Her name tore through the wood. "Mom, please." When I pulled the door, she folded, limp and shaking, and I saw everything at once. The split skin at the corner of her mouth, the thumb-shaped darkness along her jaw, the careful way she held her ribs like she was trying to keep them from falling out of place. Inside, lights on, towel, ice. My hands moved on muscle memory. My mind crashed into 2 words I couldn't outrun. My daughter. "Tell me." I kept my voice level, the way we practice. She stared past me, somewhere far away. "He found messages from her. Again. He..." Her throat closed. "The stairs." I swallowed the heat rising from my chest. "You're safe now," I said. And then I made a decision. I eased her onto the couch. The lamp washed her face in a flat yellow that didn't forgive what it saw. I dabbed the blood at her lip. It came back bright and stubborn. When I lifted the hem of her blouse, I stopped breathing. A storm of purple spread across her abdomen, the edges greened with old hurt. Not one fall. Repetition. Intent. "Did you black out?" I asked. She nodded, small and ashamed, as if fainting at my door was the sin, not what put her there. Her phone jittered on the coffee table. 10 missed calls. A name lit the glass like a siren. I flipped it face down. "We're going to the hospital." My voice chose the command before my brain debated options. "No arguments." The city at midnight is a collage. Neon and stray dogs, boys on bikes making wind of narrow streets. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near her, useless and necessary. In triage, the nurse's pen slowed when she saw the bruising. "Any loss of consciousness?" "Yes." "From stairs?" I swallowed. "From him?" "X-rays." "Vitals?" Questions that tried to be gentle and failed. I answered what she couldn't. Contusions, no internal bleeding, a shot for the pain, paperwork heavy enough to be evidence. By the time we returned, the horizon was bruising too. Dawn makes everything look honest. I brewed tea I knew she wouldn't drink and set it beside her anyway. Then I opened the hall closet and looked at the uniform I promised myself I wouldn't put on off-duty. The shirt's starch had a memory. The belt weighted like a closed fist. I dressed in silence. After the last button, I called one person who never asks why at that hour. "James," I said when the line clicked, "start the file. Today, a beat. Copy." Next, I crossed the street to the neighbor with cameras that see more than gossip does. "Ms. Lonnie," I said, "could you check last night?" She scrolled, then winced. On her phone. My daughter. Pounding our door, folding to the concrete like a candle going out. I airdropped the clip and thanked her with a grip that meant more than words. Back home, I photographed everything. Angles, timestamps, the ruler beside the worst of it. Not because I wanted to, because later, someone would try to say it wasn't that bad. I kissed my girl's forehead. Rest. Then I loaded my sidearm. The hours blurred into paperwork and waiting rooms. At the hospital, Dr. Figueres frowned at the scan results, pressing gently against my daughter's ribs. Severe contusions. No fractures. She'll heal, but slowly, and she needs peace. No more stress. Peace. The word rang hollow. Because outside those sterile walls, her tormentor still walked free, dialing her number, whispering through missed calls that he owned her silence. When we returned home, her phone lit up again, messages splashing across the lock screen before she could snatch it back. Open your mouth and lose everything. She clutched it to her chest like a cursed object. Don't look, Mom, she whispered. Her fear was so raw I didn't push further, but my blood boiled. That night, she drifted in and out of restless sleep. I sat by her side, watching the rise and fall of her chest, remembering when she was 5 and used to crawl into my bed after nightmares about shadows in the closet. I'd promised her then, Mommy makes the monsters go away, and now here she was, 20 years later, with bruises shaped like hands that swore I'd failed that promise. At dawn, I walked to the porch. The street was waking, the smell of tortillas from a stand, the neighbor's broom scraping concrete. Ms. Lanny crossed over, her eyes fierce. I heard her crying last night. That man, he has no shame. Whatever you need, I'll stand as witness. Her words were a match to dry kindling. I realized I wasn't just a mother in pain. I was a cop with a duty. And Robert, my daughter's husband, had left evidence written all over her skin. I opened my closet again. The badge caught the light. This time I pinned it on without hesitation. Then I called James, my lawyer. We'll need more than photos, I said flatly. We'll need motive, adultery, fraud, anything he's hiding. Understood, James replied. Once we start, there's no turning back. I don't plan to, I told him, and as Sarah stirred in her sleep, I whispered the vow I'd kept buried until now. He'll never touch you again. Not while I'm alive. By mid-morning, Sarah was resting in her room when my phone buzzed again. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Robert. His number burned against the screen like a brand. I rejected the call, but rage still climbed my spine. How dare he? After what he'd done, he still thought he could reach into this house with a phone call. I stepped outside, needing air, but the street only fed my anger. Whispers chased me. 2 women by the bakery leaned close, their voices dripping. Did you hear? She's exaggerating. Robert wouldn't do that unless she provoked him. Their eyes cut to me, then darted away. Across the plaza, an old man muttered, Elizabeth is just using her badge to settle family drama. The betrayal stung worse than the gossip. These were neighbors who had watched Sarah grow, who had sat at our table for Christmas tamales. Now they turned their backs, eager to believe the man with the charming smile instead of the woman with bruises. When I returned inside, Sarah was curled up, whispering through half-sleep. He pushed me? Denise was laughing? My heart dropped. Denise? The mistress. The woman who invaded my daughter's home, mocking her, fueling Robert's cruelty. That evening, I sat with Sarah, documenting fresh photos of the bruises on her wrists. I included the clock in the frame for timestamp proof. Each click of the shutter felt like a blade, cutting me with the reminder of what she endured. Then I made a decision. If Robert had another woman, I would find her. If he flaunted his betrayal in public, I'd be there with a camera. Not just as a mother, but as an officer building a case. So I dressed down, tucked my camera into a bag, and drove to the one place I knew he couldn't resist, the Arches Bar, a neon graveyard for cheap secrets. I parked in the alley, engine off, watching through the cracked windshield. At 8:13 p.m., his silver truck rolled in. A woman in a red dress stepped from the shadows, lips painted like a warning sign. Denise. He wrapped his arm around her waist like she belonged to him. I lifted the camera. Click. The flash of neon lit their faces in sharp betrayal. I stayed hunched in the shadows, the camera my weapon. Each photo was another nail in his coffin, Robert's hand pressed against Denise's back, his mouth too close to her ear, their laughter spilling into the night, like they had no fear. I followed them at a careful distance. Past the bar's back alley, they slipped into a cheap hotel with a flickering red sign. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. A photo of them entering hand in hand, Robert's truck plate glinting under the neon clock, was enough. Hard proof. By the time I got home, it was near midnight. I uploaded everything to a password-protected folder, my hands shaking not from fear, but adrenaline. For the first time since Sarah had collapsed at my door, I felt the scales of justice begin to tip. I called James. "I have photos," I said simply. "Faces. License plate. Timestamp." His tone sharpened. "That's it, Elizabeth. That's what we needed. Guard them well. This man won't go down without a fight." I closed the laptop, just as Sarah's voice called from the spare room, panicked. "Mom!" I rushed in. She was trembling, the phone clutched in her hands. "He's threatening my friends now." He called Clara, said if she didn't tell him where I was, he'd ruin her too. Her face was pale, fear etched deep. I took the phone, powered it off, and slid the SIM card out. "Not anymore. He won't track you through this." I replaced it with a blank one I kept for emergencies. Her shoulders sagged with relief, but her eyes were still full of storm. "Mom, he'll never stop." I cupped her face, forcing her to look at me. "Yes, he will. Because I'll stop him." That night, while she slept at Ms. Lani's house under watch, I sat at my kitchen table organizing every shred of evidence. Photos, medical records, the neighbor's video. It wasn't just a file, it was a weapon. And I promised myself, the next time Robert looked me in the eyes, he'd see that weapon aimed straight at him. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains. But I hadn't slept. My table was a battlefield of evidence, photos scattered like weapons, the USB with the neighbor's video plugged in, medical reports stacked like silent witnesses. I didn't just want Robert arrested. I wanted him stripped bare in front of everyone who once praised him. By noon, I drove Sarah to meet James at his office. She was pale, wrapped in a scarf to hide the worst of the bruises. James laid everything out across his desk. Photos, reports, the video clip. His lawyer's gaze was sharp, but measured. "This is solid," he said. "But to shut the door on him completely, we need fraud, proof of his greed, not just his fists." As if fate was listening, my phone rang. The caller ID made me frown. Romero Alcazar, an old acquaintance at the property registry. His voice was low, hurried. "Elizabeth, I shouldn't be calling, but I saw something strange." "Your name and Sarah's, on a land transfer file, signed over to a woman named Denise. The air in my lungs turned to stone." "That's impossible," I muttered. "Not impossible. Forged," Romero replied. "And the one who brought the papers?" "Robert. Be careful. Someone inside helped him." When I held the photocopy in my hands, the signatures looked like ghosts of ours, shaky imitations. Sarah sat beside me, tears brimming. "He stole Grandpa's land," she whispered, voice breaking. "It was more than property. That land was memory, my father's sweat, my family's pride, and Robert dared to trample it, forging our names as if we were nothing." I pressed the papers flat on James's desk. My jaw locked. "This is the final nail. Domestic violence, adultery, fraud. He won't crawl out of this." James nodded slowly. Then brace yourself. He'll come at you harder now. I looked at Sarah, her hands trembling, and placed mine over them. Let him try, I said. This time he'll hit the law instead of my daughter. The forged paper sat heavy in my bag like contraband, but heavier still was the decision I knew was coming. Robert wasn't just a violent husband. He was a thief, a manipulator, a predator who wore respectability like a mask, and I had enough evidence now to tear that mask off. That evening I met with Commander Rosales, my most trusted colleague. His office smelled of stale coffee and gun oil, the familiar perfume of long nights. I laid everything before him, the photos, the hospital report, the neighbor's footage, and now the fraudulent deed. He studied them in silence, then leaned back, his expression carved from stone. Elizabeth, this case could burn half the town. He has people protecting him. Then let them burn too, I shot back. My voice surprised even me, sharp, unwavering. I won't let my daughter rot while he drinks and laughs with his mistress. Rosales rubbed his temple, then nodded. I'll station a patrol near Miss Lonnie's house. Sarah must be watched at all times. But you, be careful. Robert's cornered now. A cornered man is the most dangerous. That night, I returned home, restless. The safe in my bedroom held the files, but it felt too small for the weight of my anger. I needed to look Robert in the eye, to tell him the game was over. Saturday morning, I dressed in plain clothes, jeans, jacket, civilian. But in my bag, I carried the file, my arsenal. I drove to his pawn shop, the place he lorded over like a king of scraps. Inside, smoke and the metallic tang of coins filled the air. His henchmen sneered as I walked past, but I ignored them. Robert sat in the back, counting bills, his smirk curling as he saw me. Well, well, the police mother-in-law, he mocked. Come to beg for mercy? I dropped the file on his desk. Photos, reports, forged deeds, the truth laid bare between us. His smirk faltered. Only for a second. Robert's eyes flicked over the evidence. The photos of Sarah's bruises, the hospital's stamped report, the neighbor's recording, time-stamped at midnight, the forged transfer papers with his fingerprints all over them, though he thought he was clever. For a heartbeat, his confidence cracked. But then the smirk returned, sharpened like a blade. He shoved the file back across the desk. You think a few papers scare me? I have lawyers who eat people like you for breakfast. I leaned closer, my voice cold enough to freeze the smoke between us. Then I hope they choke. Because this isn't a family squabble anymore. This is the law, and the law has teeth. He slammed a fist against the desk, making the money stacks jump. His voice rose, venom dripping. Your daughter is weak. She deserved to be disciplined. Don't think that badge will always protect you, Elizabeth. Every muscle in me screamed to leap across the desk, to put my hands where his had been, on Sarah's body. But I forced my rage into steel. I picked up the file, slid it back into my bag, and stood tall. You don't get to discipline anyone again, I said. The rules just changed. The law is coming for you, Robert, and this time, you can't hide behind your lies. As I turned to leave, his voice chased me. Walk out that door, and you're no longer family. You'll regret it, I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. Without looking back, I answered, From this moment on, you're no longer my daughter's husband. Outside, the sunlight hit me like a spotlight. I pulled out my phone and called James. My voice was steady, iron-wrapped. It's time. File the lawsuit. He exhaled, knowing what it meant. Get ready, Elizabeth. He'll strike back with everything I know, I said, and I'll be waiting. The lawsuit was filed on Monday morning, and by Tuesday, the town was buzzing. Gossip moved faster than fact. At the market, whispers slithered through the aisles. "Sarah made it up," one woman muttered by the tomatoes. "Robert said she wanted his money. That's why she bruised herself." Another man leaned on his cane, shaking his head. "Elizabeth's just abusing her badge. Trying to ruin her son-in-law." Each word was a knife in my back. These were people who once shared coffee at my table, who kissed Sarah's cheeks when she was little. Now they were so eager to believe his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. A man they admired was a monster. James warned me. "He's hired Valdivia. Big city lawyer, aggressive. He'll try to paint Sarah as hysterical and you as corrupt. Brace yourself." The papers landed on James's desk like an accusation in ink. Robert claimed Sarah fabricated everything to extort him. He claimed I used my authority as an officer to smear his name. It was poison, and it spread fast. That evening, as I walked Sarah to Ms. Laney's house, two of Robert's thugs leaned against a wall, cigarettes glowing. One sneered, "Careful. Folks here believe Robert more than you." The other chuckled, smoke curling like a warning. I didn't answer. I just gripped Sarah's hand tighter and got her inside. But their words clung to me, because deep down, I knew they weren't wrong. Public opinion was tilting, and fast. Later that night, I returned home to find an envelope shoved under my door. No address, no sender. Just a scrap of paper with words scrawled in thick ink. "Shut up, or you lose your daughter." My hands trembled, not with fear, but fury. He thought threats could silence me. He thought lies could bury truth. He was wrong. I slipped the note into my evidence file, one more brick in the wall I was building against him. I drove to James's office that same night, the threatening note sealed in an evidence bag. His face hardened as he read it. Good. The more reckless he gets, the tighter he ties the noose around himself. "But the town," I muttered, pacing. "They believe him. They see me as the villain, not him." James tapped the desk with a finger, deliberate. "Then we need a blow strong enough to flip public opinion. And there's only one person who can deliver it." I already knew the name before he said it. Denise, the mistress who laughed while Sarah was beaten. The woman Robert flaunted at bars and hotels. The accomplice who thought she'd get a share of the land he stole. My stomach clenched at the thought of standing face to face with her. She wasn't just a witness. She was part of Sarah's suffering. Still, James was right. If Denise flipped, Robert's lies would collapse. The next evening, I dressed in a baggy jacket and cap, blending into shadows. I went to the bar at the end of Hidalgo Street, the one Denise was known to haunt. Inside, smoke and tequila thickened the air. Ranchera music howled from the jukebox. I sat in a corner booth watching the door. At 10:07 p.m. she appeared. Short red dress, lips painted the same color, glass of rum in hand. She laughed loudly, too loudly, as if trying to cover her fear. I crossed the room, sat opposite her. She raised an eyebrow, defensive. "And who are you?" I didn't answer. I placed an envelope on the table. Inside, a copy of the forged land papers and her own bank statement, red with debt. Her laughter vanished. Her hand trembled as she opened the flap. "I'm Robert's mother-in-law," I said evenly. "If you stay with him, you'll sink. But if you testify, you might just save yourself." Denise let out a short, mocking laugh, but it cracked halfway. Her eyes darted to the papers, then to me. "Robert said the land was mine. He promised. He told me everything would be fine." Her words were shaky, her bravado slipping like cheap makeup. I leaned forward, my voice like ice. "He forged our names." "That's fraud. And when the trial begins, your name will be right next to his. You think he'll protect you? He'll throw you under the bus to save himself." Her lipstick-stained glass trembled in her hand. She downed the drink in one swallow, as if courage came bottled. "And what do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Testify. Tell the truth. Admit what he did with the land. Admit how he used you to humiliate Sarah. Do that, and maybe you walk free." The bar door swung open. My pulse spiked. Robert's two thugs, Los Chamucos, stepped inside, scanning the room. Their eyes landed on me, on Denise. Their jaws tightened. I didn't flinch. Instead, I slid my police badge onto the table, its metal catching the dim light. "Go ahead," I said quietly, loud enough for them to hear. "Try something." They froze. For a moment the music seemed to hush, the whole bar holding its breath. Then slowly, they backed toward the door, retreating like dogs sensing fire. Denise exhaled shakily, her mask finally breaking. Her voice cracked. "If I testify, he'll kill me." I met her eyes, steady. "Not if I bury him first. And I don't plan to lose." She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. "Okay, I'll testify, but you swear I'll be protected." I didn't make promises. I simply said, "If you do the right thing, I'll do everything I can." The night air outside the bar was colder than I remembered. Denise walked one way, escorted discreetly by Rosales' men, while I walked the other, my steps steady but my chest burning with adrenaline. For the first time, I felt the war tilt in my favor. Robert had lost his mistress, his false alibi, and soon, his mask. The morning of the trial arrived. I rose before dawn, cooking broth more for myself than Sarah, though I carried the tray to her bedside. She stirred, her eyes heavy, her lips still swollen from old wounds. "Eat, honey. You'll need your strength." She sat up slowly, pulling on a pale blue dress. I wrapped a scarf around her neck to hide the bruises still peeking through. As I brushed her hair back, I whispered, "You don't have to bow your head anymore." Outside, Commander Rosales was waiting with a patrol car. His nod was firm, his tone reassuring. "I've arranged escort, Elizabeth. Today, nothing touches you or Sarah." The courthouse was packed, buzzing like a hive. Neighbors filled the benches, some curious, some hostile, some pretending neutrality while their eyes betrayed judgment. At the front, Robert stood with Valdivia, polished in a suit, his smirk razor sharp. But his eyes flickered when they landed on Denise, seated far from him, arms crossed. Judge Cervantes entered, and the room silenced. James began first, his voice calm but commanding. Piece by piece, he laid the case bare, photos of Sarah's injuries projected on the screen, Dr. Figueres's medical report, the midnight video of Sarah collapsing at my door. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some shocked, some shaken. Robert's lawyer rose, his words cutting. "This is fabrication." A story spun to ruin my client. Elizabeth abused her badge. Sarah, desperate for money, bruised herself. The bile in my throat almost spilled out. But James was ready. He played Robert's threatening texts across the screen. "Open your mouth and lose everything." Gasps echoed. Even Valdivia shifted, his jaw tight. And then came Denise's turn. She took the stand, trembling but resolute. Her voice cracked but carried. "Robert forged the land transfer. He promised me a share. He lied to me. He lied to everyone." The courtroom erupted. Robert jumped to his feet, shouting, "You traitor!" Guards forced him down. Denise's eyes watered, but she didn't waver. For the first time, she chose truth. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the court, not in uniform, but in my own skin. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and faced the crowd. "I am a police officer," I began, my voice steady. "But today, I stand here as a mother. My daughter came to me in the middle of the night, broken, battered, and begging for safety. And I will not allow anyone, not even a man who once sat at my table, to destroy her." My gaze locked on Robert. He glared, but his smirk had vanished. That man is not a husband. He is not a protector. He is a liar and an abuser. And I will fight until he is held accountable. The room erupted in whispers, some supportive, some doubtful. But I saw Sarah sitting in the front row, her eyes glistening, her shoulders a little straighter. For her, I would keep standing. Judge Cervantes pounded his gavel. Silence fell. His voice carried the weight of the room. After reviewing the evidence, hearing the testimonies, and considering the severity of the accusations, he paused, letting the tension drag every eye toward him. This court issues a protection order for Sarah, freezes all assets under Robert Mendez's name, nullifies the fraudulent land transfer, and refers the case to the district attorney for charges of domestic violence and fraud. Robert slumped back into his chair, his face pale. Valdivia removed his glasses, wiping sweat from his brow. The crowd murmured louder now. Shock, relief, disbelief mixing in the air. Sarah reached for my hand, squeezing it hard. Tears streaked her cheeks. But they weren't just from pain. For the first time in months, I saw something else in her eyes. Hope. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the midday sun hit us like a benediction. People whispered as we passed, "Elizabeth won." Justice won. But inside, I knew better. A verdict doesn't erase bruises. It doesn't erase nights of fear. It doesn't erase betrayal. Justice was here. But healing was still a long road. That afternoon, the police marched into Robert's pawnshop. Word spread like fire, and by the time he was led out in handcuffs, half the neighborhood had gathered. Some shouted insults, some spat. Others just watched in silence. The man who once boasted power now looked small in his prison uniform, his smirk gone, replaced by the hollow stare of someone cornered at last. I wasn't there. I didn't want to see him in chains. I wanted to remember the moment in court when his lies crumbled. Still, the next morning, the local paper landed on my doorstep. His mugshot stared back at me, headline screaming, "Pawn shop owner, arrested for violence and fraud." I traced the photo with my finger, not with satisfaction, but with a deep, aching sadness. This was the man I had once trusted with my daughter's life. This was the man who had sat at my table, called me Mom, smiled like family. Betrayal leaves a scar deeper than bruises. Denise vanished from town soon after. Rumor had it she went to Monterey to start fresh. I didn't blame her. She had been part of Sarah's torment, but in the end, she chose truth. Maybe that was her redemption. Robert's henchmen weren't so lucky. Los Chamucos were arrested for tampering with witnesses. Their absence made the streets quieter, safer. For the first time in months, I walked the neighborhood without feeling eyes on my back. Sarah moved in with me, permanently. The first weeks were hard. She woke up screaming most nights, drenched in sweat, convinced Robert was at the door. I'd sit with her, hold her hand, whispering, "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore," but deep down, I knew wounds like hers weren't only skin deep. I drove her to therapy weekly. Watching her walk into that office, shoulders hunched, eyes haunted, was like watching a piece of myself stagger under a weight too heavy. But slowly, very slowly, I began to see sparks of my daughter again. One afternoon, I came home to find her in the kitchen, singing softly as she stirred a pot of enchiladas. Her voice was fragile, almost breaking, but it was there. A melody I thought I'd lost. And in that moment, I realized healing doesn't arrive all at once. It slips in quietly, in laughter, in song, in moments too small to notice, until they're already filling the house again. The town began to shift, little by little. Neighbors who had once whispered poison started approaching me at the market. Some offered awkward smiles, others soft apologies. "We didn't know the truth, Elizabeth," one woman said, her eyes downcast. I nodded. not with forgiveness, but with understanding. Robert's charm had blinded many, and fear had silenced the rest. Ms. Laney, the neighbor who'd given me the crucial video, visited often. She brought sweet bread, hugged Sarah, and whispered, "You turned out stronger than your mother ever was." Sarah laughed at that. And for the first time, her laughter didn't sound forced. At the station, my work felt different. Every domestic violence call I answered carried the weight of my own story. One night, I found a teenage girl crying outside, her wrists red from her boyfriend's grip. I sat beside her on the curb and said softly, "You're not alone." My mother lived it. My daughter lived it. And I once stayed silent too, but silence only feeds monsters. Her tear-streaked face lifted, and in her eyes I saw the flicker of hope I had once prayed for Sarah. Weeks turned into months. Sarah grew stronger. She no longer covered her face when we went out. She no longer flinched at the sound of a slammed door. One evening, she came home late, her smile radiant. "Mom, I got the job. Office assistant in accounting." I pulled her into my arms, both of us crying, not tears of sorrow, but of survival, of rebirth. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the same street where Sarah had collapsed at my door months before. The memory was vivid, her broken voice whispering, "He dragged me over the stairs." 10 times that memory would never fade, but beside it now lived another, her singing softly in the kitchen, her laughter in the market, her voice full of life. Justice had given us safety. Healing had given us back hope. As months passed, Sarah's scars slowly softened into reminders, not shackles. The bruises faded, but the nights of fear lived on in shadows that only time and love could dim. I kept taking her to therapy, kept sitting outside those doors waiting, sipping bitter coffee, praying each session lifted a little more of her burden. And it worked. Bit by bit, Sarah began to reclaim herself. She no longer hid behind scarves. She smiled more freely, laughed louder, even teased me again like she used to when she was a teenager. The girl I thought had been lost was finding her way back. The town, too, shifted its gaze. People who once believed Robert's lies began to nod at us in quiet respect. A few offered clumsy apologies. I didn't need them. What mattered was that Sarah could walk the streets without whispers following her. Miss Laney stayed close, always watchful. She became like family, her loyalty a reminder that allies still exist even when the world turns its back. One evening, Sarah came home humming, carrying groceries for dinner. She moved around the kitchen with a lightness I hadn't seen in years, and then, as she stirred the pot, she sang. A soft tune, nothing fancy, but to me, it was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Tears filled my eyes. It was proof that joy, fragile as glass, had returned. That night, I sat again on the porch, watching the same street where everything had begun, the desperate pounding on the door, the collapse into my arms, the words that shattered me. "Mom, he dragged me over the stairs." 10 times I thought about the trial, the threats, the betrayal, about Denise's trembling testimony, about Robert's pale face as the verdict crushed him, and I thought about Sarah's song in the kitchen, proof that monsters don't always win. The story we lived was born from pain, but it carries a question I must ask you now. If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep the peace or fight to tear it apart and reclaim your voice? Because silence only feeds the monster. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because every view, every share, every word of support is another candle lit for someone still in the dark. Justice gave us safety. But courage, that gave us tomorrow.